Now, we have Greg Jarrett, 3 weeks and running now, #1 New York Times bestseller. His book, which is The Russian Hoax, The Illicit Scheme to Clear Hillary Clinton and Frame Donald Trump. And Sara Carter is with us, Fox News investigative reporter and contributor. And Sara, by the way, is even breaking more news that in the summer of 2016, then FBI Director James Comey had been advised that former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid would be sending him a letter, which he did send, asking to investigate allegations that President Trump's campaign had colluded with Russia, according to documents now obtained by Congress. And this was written several days after, John Brennan had met with Harry Reid. And by the way, most investigators believe that Brennan privately briefed Reid about the dossier. It's in Greg's book, by the way, and we'll get to whether or not that had actually happened. Sara, why don't you give us more details and why that would be relevant, the timing of the heads up that Comey had?
Well, it was extraordinarily relevant, Sean, because it would tell us whether or not Brennan, the CIA, was working with the FBI during that summer with regard to the dossier. And it seems like it would make common sense, because if we think about it in terms of the dossier, this is a foreign spy, Christopher Steele, who put together these 16-part memos that compiled the dossier, and it would be extraordinary if the FBI was investigating this without making contact with the CIA. What makes this important is the fact that Brennan had briefed the Gang of Eight that summer, and then Reid had called him in for basically a private meeting on August 25th, 2016. So he met with Reid. 2 days later, a letter goes to Comey. Now, documents that have been obtained by Congress show that Comey was expecting this letter even before he received it. He goes, so here Brennan is now talking to Reid. This is on August 25th. 2 days later, Reid gets this letter, right? Sends this letter to Comey. 2 days after the letter goes to Comey, it gets leaked to the New York Times and on August 29th. And then the story comes out. It fleshes out even more. This is right before the election, where they're accusing Trump and people in his campaign of colluding with Russia. And I think there's a lot of concern among congressional officials. We know that Judicial Watch now has sued for all of the communications between Brennan and Harry Reid, and they want to know what those connections were, what his connections were with Comey as well, and how this all evolved. Were all these agencies in collusion with each other? Were they involved with the DOJ? Was the CIA involved in the FBI's investigation? And I think that's going to be very telling how far these people were involved in this alleged Russia-Trump collusion case.
Well, and then it pushes the date back earlier. And then remember, this is July or the summer of 2016. And remember, we now believe it all started even before they ended the Clinton investigation, as evidence points out. Greg, you write about this Brennan-Harry Reid meeting in your book. I want to go over it specifically. We know that meeting took place, correct?
Yes, it's actually on page 100 of my book. They meet on the 25th. Harry Reid sends out a letter to James Comey on the 27th in an obvious attempt to influence the election. He claims Trump-Russia collusion, and they purposely did this, Brennan and Reid, to leak it to the media, to harm President or then candidate Trump in his election bid. And so it didn't work. Only the Washington Post picked up on it. And so then Harry Reid doubles down and does it again. He sends another letter about a month later, just before the election, to harm Trump. And once again, he alleges Trump-Russian collusion. And John Brennan, as I identify in the book, was the instigator. He did more than anyone to propagate and promulgate the Russia hoax. He's the guy who was peddling this false dossier. And James Comey was in on it all along. I tweeted out earlier today that it is always amusing when Comey weighs in, as he did over the weekend, about lies and lying people, because this is a guy who sermonizes about it in the book, and yet he's the guy who basically conjured out of thin air the Russia hoax all by himself, with some help from John Brennan, James Clapper, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, and others, as I explained in the book. So Brennan is not the kind of person who should ever be close to classified information. The president was correct in making sure that he had his classification revoked. And so too Comey and all of the other people I just named. They should never be anywhere near classified information.
You know, look at all the people, Sarah. Comey fired, McCabe fired, Strzok fired, Page resigns, Rybicki resigns, Baker resigns, and other FBI departures that have taken place that are under scrutiny at this particular time. Then you got, Sally Yates fired, Bruce Orr demoted twice, and then, all told between the FBI and the DOJ, 25 people resigned, fired, or demoted over all of this. And then you have, the news media still ignores the insanity that has gone on here at the top levels of the FBI and the DOJ.
I think it's incredible, Sean, that this is possibly one of the biggest scandals in modern political history. And the mainstream media and audiences that watch the mainstream media or read the mainstream media are really blinded by what happened because the information is not getting out there. This is so important. It sits on everything our Constitution stands for because it talks about the weaponizing of our intelligence community, our privacy rights, the ability for people within the government to try to unseat a duly elected president. You can't get a story bigger than this. And just to clarify on one thing, because in my story I did reach out to John Brennan numerous times, and I did get a response.
This guy Shapiro.
His former chief of staff, Nick Shapiro, responded on behalf of Brennan. This was his former chief of staff at the CIA, and denied any allegations suggesting that he knew about the dossier before December 2016, the contents of the dossier. Now, when I pushed on it and said, look, I knew about the dossier during that summer, there were rumors all over Washington, D.C. that somebody was peddling some kind of information about a report of Trump in Russia. How could I know about it and the head of the CIA not know about it? And then he went back and said, well, he had heard about its existence, but hadn't seen the contents, hadn't been briefed on it.
Okay, so he didn't bring this up with Harry Reid. Is that what he's claiming?
That's what he's claiming. He is claiming that he did.
And how many days after he met with Harry Reid did Reid send Comey the memo or the letter?
Absolutely. He said that Reid had asked him to brief him. Reid had asked him permission to basically put in his letter the contents of the briefing that he gave to the Gang of Eight on Russia, and that he had denied Reid that I guess that permission to put the contents of what he had briefed the Gang of Eight on, but Reid had sent the letter anyways regarding whatever he knew about the dossier.
Don't we have evidence, too, that Brennan was involved in spreading this false dossier information in the media?
So according to sources, Brennan was actually involved in spreading this dossier and rumors about this dossier. Now, remember, this is Washington, D.C., and people say a lot of things. That's why I reached out to Brennan personally. Now, we have Brennan on the record saying this. But what we don't have is all of the communications which the CIA has denied, and they probably will deny on a national security basis, that were requested by Judicial Watch, which would be those communications between Brennan and Reid, between Brennan and Comey, between Comey and Reid. That would be interesting to see as well, because there is a lot of suspicion that when he had that briefing with Reid on August 25th, that the contents of the dossier were discussed. And Comey was well aware that a letter would be coming from Reid. So it appeared that they all knew what was coming down the pike, and it appeared that they all knew that it was related to this dossier.
All right, let me take a break. We'll come back more with Sara Carter. We'll have full coverage of this tonight and the reasons laid out in specific detail why Brennan does not deserve a security clearance. And by the way, neither do all these other fired former officials. All right, as we continue, Greg Jarrett, #1 New York Times bestselling author, The Russian Hoax, The Illicit Scheme to Clear Hillary Clinton, Frame Donald Trump. 3 weeks and running now, #1 on the New York Times list. Sara Carter, Fox News contributor, investigative reporter. Sara has a new story out. Let me go back to what Brennan knew and did. And Greg, if so, he's meeting with Harry Reid in August, right? We believe. And Harry Reid gets the details August 30th, 2016. What do we know about Director Brennan's briefing that had taken place just a couple of days prior to that? And similarly, what do we know about Brennan using the dossier to disseminate false information?
Well, he clearly had the dossier in his possession. He admits when he testified, and this is also in my book, when he testified before Congress, he said he knew of Trump-Russia connections and conspiracy and collusion. And he knew that in the summer of 2016. So there's no question that he knew about that. That's documented in my book. It's well-sourced. And it's, in fact, his under oath testimony. So he meets with Harry Reid in late August. And it's no coincidence that Reid sends out a letter to James Comey. It was all a con job. They both knew that on the 31st of July, Comey had already launched officially by signing papers under the name of Peter Strzok the Trump-Russia collusion case. But the media didn't know it, so they were looking for an excuse to let the media know about it, to run with it, to harm Trump in the election and help Hillary Clinton. So Harry Reid leaks his letter alleging Trump-Russia collusion. The Washington Post.
Well, he's never gonna tell the truth either, because.
No, of course not. He has a long and distinguished history of lies. He's one of the most prodigious, prolific liars in all of Congress.
Let me let Sarah have the last word, only because we're running out of time. Both of you will join us on Hannity tonight, but I want to make sure we get Sarah's last words in here. Sarah.
Well, I think there's a lot of concern here. What we need to find out, Sean, is how deep were the other agencies involved in this investigation into President Trump? What were their actions? What took place between them? What was the information shared between the FBI and CIA? I think that's very important. I think that's very telling, and I think that's the direction Congress is going to take right now.
All right. Thank you both for being with us. Sarah, Greg, we'll have more details tonight.